Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 608 for the 7th of June, 2020. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. No, I'm not having a lazy afternoon. I'm having a busy morning putting together the Skeptic Zone. And what a show we have for you this week. We're going to kick off with an interview with a dear old friend of mine, Loretta Marron, also known as the Jellybean Lady. Why is she known as the Jellybean Lady? Well, for years, she's been campaigning against the quackery, the absurdity, the the bizarre methodology known as homeopathy. And she was famous for carrying around a large jar of jelly beans to say that sugar, the jelly beans made out of sugar, were just as effective as homeopathy. But also she turned her attention to the biomachines we've been discussing on the Skeptic Zones. These are the ones where you hook yourself up to something on your head or your arm or your foot or who knows where, and some machine pretends or claims or appears to scan your body with magical waves, and then the results are shown on a computer screen or a buzzing buzzer zaps or something or other. And these machines also claim to send energy back into your body to kill viruses and parasites. Not even Dr. McCoy had something like this. Find out more when we chat to Loretta Marron from the Friends of Science in Medicine. After that, it's a follow-up report from Susan Gerbic from Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia. You will remember last week she discussed the sting, the psychic sting she did in New Zealand, or she was in California. The psychic was in New Zealand. Well, the New Zealand media have now taken up the story of this so-called psychic offering what can be best described as extremely questionable health advice when it comes to preventing COVID-19. And then it's the return of Michelle Bijkersma with Logical Fallacies. This week, Michelle looks at the False Equivalence Fallacy. This is when it is argued that two different things or points of view that may only have passing or superficial similarities are in fact logically equivalent. Can you compare apples with oranges? Find out with Michelle Bijkersma. Then we have some news from the newsletter of Australian Skeptics, number 99. Newsletter number 99. And to round off the show, I chat to author Bailey Harris in the United States, and here in Brisbane I chat to Ariel Marcy. These two women have got together to create Go Extinct, Stardust Catches the Carnivores, a new board game about evolution, teaching kids all about evolution, in this instance about carnivores. Also in this interview you can find out how you can help with this project yourself. Stay tuned at the end of the show for more announcements from me. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, jumping over the cats who've already had their breakfast. They've already ran downstairs about 10 minutes ago and had their lovely cat kibbles. I wonder what they taste like. I better not find out. Now it's time for me to run downstairs and have something which I have occasionally, which is freshly toasted toast. Do you toast toast? No, you toast bread. Some freshly toasted bread, which is toast. just a little bit of chili sauce, peanut butter on top of that, then a few peanuts on top of that. So it's sort of like a chili satay sauce in a way on toast. It's pretty good. Well, I think so. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Folks, a couple of weeks ago on the show you would have heard us talking about these bio-machines, these feedback machines, these bioresonance machines that plague our society still. The machines you hook onto yourself or you get strapped up to, they send a mystical, magical energy wave or waves or something through your body. They bounce around your organs and are fed back, so the naturopath or the natural health provider in question can then read the results and suggest some treatment. Joining me now on the line from Queensland is somebody who has been investigating these machines for years. It's the Jellybean Lady, Loretta Marron.
Good morning, Richard.
Now, I ask you to drop by the Skeptic Zone today because for so many years you've been investigating these machines. What could we call them broadly? What could we say? The bioresonance, zapping type, frequency, energy devices?
There's two ways. One, you can call them electrical quack machines, but generally we refer to them as electrodermal screening devices. Electrodermal meaning the electricity passes along your skin and diagnoses all that ails you and fixes it too. Exactly right.
And we've mentioned many times on the show this, the one I've personally seen and some of the members of the Skeptic Zone, this Metatron, NLS, Metatron Nonlinear Scanner, the device from Russia. But no matter where they're from, I know that you must have come across many of these machines.
I've counted about 30 that are still being used now. In fact, I listed them all and they were attached to a report to the TGA just to show the depth of these machines, which cost from, maybe a few $100s to thousands of dollars, $25,000. They're not cheap.
Yes, indeed. Not cheap at all. And there are lots of people out there making serious money by selling these machines. And they sell them to natural health proponents or naturopaths, for example, who really do think that these machines work. Now, I notice here in a little report that you've sent me that in 2010, there were over 220 of these websites listed.
Well, back in those times, a decade ago now, I had decided that I was getting nowhere with the TGA. And I thought, well, if they could ignore me, but could they ignore the individual states? So I went round the internet and I found over 220 websites. I then sorted them by state and then put them in reports, which you can see are about a centimetre thick. And that included every image from every website, the names and addresses. And I sent them all out to the individual states.
Yes.
And I waited. And what happened is West Australia came back to me and said, Loretta, what are these things? And I said, well, if you put your wet finger on a light switch, you get a little bit of a tingle. I said, that's pretty much what it is. It's a little tiny amount of electricity going through your body. And she said, well, I know what you mean. My husband's an electrician. So that was good. And then I was contacted by Victoria and they came up with the same question. And I said, why don't you talk to West Australia? Well, the next thing I knew, some of the devices were cancelled, but not all of them. The one called the Bicom, they told me it was cancelled, but when I had a look, it was still there. And that's taken a decade of writing to the TGA to get that one removed.
There's also one that you've brought to my notice called the Cyber Scan. Is that a similar sort of thing?
The Cyber Scan actually came after 2010. It was listed with the TGA a few years later. So I didn't have it on the initial reports, but it's a similar sort of thing. In fact, they all are. They have some sort of idea that they're based on quantum physics, homeopathy, and acupuncture. And this is just there to remove your toxins or identify chemicals, poisons, viruses, bacteria. They claim they can kill viruses. What they state is that everything on the planet has a frequency, and these machines can detect that frequency, and using quantum physics can turn it around and zap the virus, bacteria with the same frequency, and you're cured. Cancer as well, that's on the list for some of them. One called the Rife, you're probably familiar with, which is still going, and Hulda Clark, people like that. So the machines were still there, and once again, back to the Therapeutic Goods Administrating, challenging these machines, showing the claims, and the TGA said, well, it's not the sponsor making the claims, it's one of the the people selling the devices. So I thought, well, that's a great loophole, isn't it? They get Fred to sponsor it, and then, their mates start making the claims. And the claims included things like fixing up autism and curing smoking addiction, all for $175 a meeting you have with them, and you need up to 3 to 8 sessions. So when I contacted Bicom, for example, I actually asked them what the machine cost, and they said it was something like $34,000, but I could make over $100,000 a year. And it was TGA approved, right? So the aim there was to get rid of the approval note. That's all we can do, because it's all about advertising. The TGA can't ban these devices. They're not killing anybody. But they can delist them, which means technically that naturopaths shouldn't be using them. But the problem is that I sent in over 200 complaints from Friends of Science in Medicine. You know that I'm the CEO of that great group. We now have been going for over 8 years, yes. And anyway, what the TGA in their wisdom did, they cancelled every one of the complaints, sent the whole lot back to me, and said they were going to do an education campaign. Now, we're looking here from dates back in August 2018 to February this year, when finally the Bicom sponsor actually cancelled their device. So it's taken, and that was a celebration, because I figured that was 10 years fighting to have that device cancelled. And what happened was we flew to Canberra to meet with the national manager, and he said, I can't cancel that device because it's a biofeedback device, and that has a legitimate place in healthcare. Well, that took a while for the penny to drop, until a year or so later I thought, no, it's not. So back I went to people like Dr. Steve Roberts on quantum physics, and got advice from proper biofeedback experts from Australia, from overseas, and they said this is not a biofeedback device. And that helped, I believe, as well. But the TGN then, as I say, they sent all the complaints back, but they said they would launch an inquiry into looking at the research for these devices to see whether they worked or not. And give them credit, they still have to give the people the right to come back with their own research. They can't just say it's nonsense because the science says it's nonsense. Anyway, they obviously didn't come back with appropriate research, and they cancelled them. So that was a big day this year. We quietly had a drink after all that time to say, at long last, they're all gone. But the trouble is, the education campaign meant that the TGA sent letters out to all the bodies that representing natural therapists. And 8 months later, I heard that the Australian Traditional Medicine Society, who represent most of the natural therapists, still have not notified their members. They admitted that they had not sent out the letter. So how effective this education campaign is going to be, tricky when the associations don't let their members know that they're actually breaking the law. That's sad.
Yeah, when you see these machines in action, and I'm thinking about the one I've seen myself, which is called the Metatron I mentioned before, and you sit in front of a laptop and you put on a pair of what look to be headphones, and on the screen is displayed pictures of your vital organs, down to the level of DNA, and it also says it can zap viruses and parasites and things like that. It is so bizarre. It is so obviously fake. I'm quite surprised that other aspects of the legal system don't come into play here. I mean, what happened to good old-fashioned consumer protection, for example? And, now come to think of it, Al Capone, they finally got him not for all the horrible crimes he was committing, but they got him for tax evasion. So with these machines, if they can't get them on purely health claims, surely there's other avenues they can pursue when it comes to product or service that does not and cannot work.
Well, the trouble is that even when you talk to some of the doctors, they say, well, that's not hurting anyone. And I was actually invited to become a witness at a parliamentary inquiry into allergies and anaphylaxis. And one of the challenges I had was to get rid of these devices, because all of them claim they can actually identify and cure your allergies. And the doctor up on the panel said, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. He said, what's wrong with the devices if they don't hurt anybody? And I said, they do in 3 ways. I said, one is that they are taking money from you, so they're financially robbing you. I said the second one is that they're actually delaying treatment for patients. So if a child has a bad allergy and they go to these practitioners and they spend $175 a time and they go there for 8 weeks in a row, you've delayed a proper treatment. And the third one is the disappointment by the family when they spend all this money and the child is no longer, is not getting any better. And I thought that was very sad. Now, I actually had a visitor here one day and she had terrible eczema. And finally, she lived out in the country. Finally, a specialist had come round and been able to give her some skin stuff to help her. And she told me of a visit to the naturopath who put her on one of these machines and she had to cross her arms over her chest. He put a damp towel on and clipped it on. And $2,000 later, she was no better off. Now, this woman was in permanent agony with this eczema, with all the scratching that you do. Her skin was so itchy, and she showed me photos. So there is harm being done here. It's not just, it's not going to hurt anybody. It's like homeopathy. It's not going to hurt anybody. So all these people are taking it in India to try to stop getting the virus. And that's giving them false hope as well. So yes, so the harm is not just physical harm, but it's financial harm, emotional harm, and harm in delaying proven treatments.
Yes, of course. And just last week on the Skeptic Zone, we had our friend Abhijit talking from India about the situation with homeopathy and how it's not really working. Well, it sounds a bit silly to say. Obviously, it's not working. But I can see the link you're making between these machines and something that looks like or promises, pseudoscience to be of benefit. Again, I'm just so gobsmacked that something so blatantly fake. Somebody's invented a computer program that looks like it's scanning your body. And these things can be available and being used. And there are people in the government who don't act straight away because it's just so obvious.
Well, hopefully things have taken a turn now that the devices are no longer listed, so that gives us new opportunities. But I must admit there are new devices still coming on the market, so we have to be right onto them.
It doesn't surprise me at all, sadly enough. Well, I'm glad that you're there. I'm glad that the Friends of Science in Medicine are keeping up the fight. I think it's very worthwhile for the very good reasons you mentioned before. And we'll be keeping an eye on that. I will link to the Friends of Science in Medicine website in this week's show notes. But for now, Loretta, sit back and have some nice jelly beans. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jo Thornley, and I'd like you to join I'd like you to listen to my podcast about cults called Zealot. It's available pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, with further reading on the Zealot Facebook page. Each episode, a guest joins me to talk about a specific cult, where we answer the big questions like, is there yoga in it? Is there yoga in it? And does anyone think they're Jesus? Does anyone think they're Jesus? Pop over to my compound and have a listen. I've just mixed up a fresh batch of Kool-Aid. Oh, Zealot.
I think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
Now, folks, last week you will remember we had an interesting story with our friend Susan Gerbic about a undercover operation. She'll tell me what it is. It's some convoluted thing with porcupines and pies and peaches and I don't know, whatever. Anyway, it's a psychic sting, another psychic sting by Susan Gerbic. This revolved around somebody who claims to talk with the dead, one Jeanette Wilson in New Zealand. But she also claims she had a preventative for COVID-19. Joining me once again from Salinas, California, it's Susan Gerbic. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Richard. Hi, listeners.
Now, what an interesting story it was. Can you just briefly recap what happened in this chat room?
Well, we were trying to see if we could catch the psychic healer into giving us some advice about vaccines, because we've been told she's anti-vax. She complained about her Wikipedia page having quotes on it saying that she's anti-vax. So we wanted to see if we can catch her actually saying it on video, her beliefs. And boy, did we. I attended a online session along with a couple members from the New Zealand Skeptics, and we recorded everything. And we, at the very end of the workshop she gave, I asked her a question about if she was had any foresight into what's happening with COVID and the vaccine. And she gave me a 16-minute rant about COVID-19 and how we can best fix it, plus her views on the government and Donald Trump and on and on and on. And we had it all on audio.
And I think the important thing is, I mean, we know there's lots of conspiracy theories out there and people who follow it and think that the virus was man-made and you know what? You know, people have crazy ideas. But I think the important point here was that she was offering or suggesting or telling you, the audience, the listeners of her meeting, that they should try this supplement. And she was making very specific claims for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not so much the problem that she is making claims about healing or claims about speaking to the dead, but whenever you start talking about how to keep away COVID by taking some sort of supplement, that really makes my hackles go up.
Yeah. Now, there's a follow-up to the story because this has been now taken up by the New Zealand press, I believe.
Yes, it was reported by Toby McGuire in the Spin-Off.
And that's an online newspaper, so to speak, or news outlet. And folks, I'll link to that page in this week's show note. It's quite extensive. I mean, he really did listen or read the transcripts very thoroughly, and he put questions to her about it.
Yes, he contacted her, and she, I woke up to find a cease and desist, kind of take down your videos off of my channel from her. So I moved all the videos to private. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. The only reason I have the videos up on my YouTube channel was so that the media would be able to access it.
Yeah, it's sort of what's that expression? The shutting the barn gate after the horse is bolted. It really doesn't matter.
I don't really have a problem when you catch psychics in doing something like that, where they say that, you know, you recorded this and you weren't supposed to record it, or you did this or you did that. I mean, they're psychic. They should know I am on the call with them. And I spent over 2 hours on the call with her with a fake name that she should have been able to look at my face and look. She was interacting with me the whole time. Yeah. So if she didn't know that I was not who I said I was, that's not my fault. She should know that.
Well, you know, I guess it's the old thing that if they were really psychic, then they would do X, Y, Z. And their comeback is, oh, you know, it doesn't work like that.
Well, how does it work? Please show us. I'm waiting.
That's right. Okay, now, folks, again, please have a look at this report linked in the show notes. I think you'll find it really interesting reading. But I think, Susan, you were telling me there's another psychic sting being reported on.
So Thomas John Flanagan is one of the psychics that I had busted quite a few years ago in Operation Pizza Roll. And he had a show in Vegas at Caesar's Palace, and now he has a new show starting today. In fact, it's probably playing right now. It's the first episode is called The Thomas John Experience. And from what I understand, it looks just like his other show, Seatbelt Psychic, except that sometimes now he gets out of the car and he does readings with people on park benches or while he's eating or whatever. But before it was just in a car. Well, I did a lot of research before this came out, and I wrote another article, and it is out right now. Hopefully you'll link to it in the show notes. But it appeared this morning. It's printed in, it's available online at Skeptical Inquirer. And because that article came out today, I made a few predictions about what I think people are going to see on the show tonight when they watch. So my predictions are published, and so let's see how accurate I am. We're using that article, spreading it around. Of course, it's on his Wikipedia page, as well as the article from Spinoff about Jeanette Wilson, I'm sure both of them are not going to be happy about having this Wikipedia pages updated with the most recent articles.
Well, thank you, Susan, for your continuous and tireless work and your undercover work. And we'll keep an eye on things, and please alert me when you're doing your next little sneaky sting.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. You've always been so gracious in reporting our work.
Aliens are probing people and mutilating cows.
9/11 was an inside job.
Homeopathy cleared up my athlete's foot.
Vaccines cause autism.
Not all psychics are con artists. Mine is definitely real.
We all have friends and family who believe these things and much more. Well, if you're a rational thinker who is tired of arguing on social media and never getting anywhere, we have a solution for you.
Join the Guerrilla Skepticism and Wikipedia team, and we will teach you how to add reliable scientific and skeptical information to the world's #1 source of information, Wikipedia.
We write new articles and improve existing ones. We remove pseudoscience, paranormal, and alt-med claims, substituting the actual facts. And we operate in many languages.
We've already reached tens of millions of people searching for information, but as you can imagine, we can never do enough.
So please join us. All you need is a PC, a Facebook account, and the desire to help educate the planet. In fact, you'll be educating the world while you sleep.
Contact us at gsowteam@gmail.com.
Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Music by purpleplanet.com.
Logical fallacies. What are logical fallacies, and why is it important that critical thinkers should know about them? A logical fallacy is an error we can make in reasoning, but it usually crops up when we are discussing or arguing our point of view. Some people might even knowingly use them to try and score cheap points in an argument due to intellectual laziness. They are traps we can fall into, but if we know what to look out for, we can spot them when they occur and stop ourselves from using them. This time, we'll look at the false equivalence fallacy.
This is when it's argued that two different things or points of view that may have only passing or superficial similarities are in fact logically equivalent.
We've all heard the saying, "You are comparing apples with oranges." Yes, they are both fruit, both round, and both are good to eat. But despite these similarities, they are not the same thing and should not be compared as such.
Medical intuitives, those gifted people who can sense what is going on in your body, are very caring people who treat thousands of patients each year. Yes, they can make mistakes from time to time, but so do mainstream doctors. So in fact, they're much the same.
Yes, both medical intuitives and mainstream doctors are caring people who do make mistakes from time to time. They also probably drive cars, listen to music, and brush their teeth. However, all these things do not mean that they are similar when it comes to healthcare and advice. While mainstream doctors are trained in and follow the scientific method, medical intuitives rarely have medical training and rely on the unproven and frankly quite bizarre idea that they can use something akin to ESP to diagnose illnesses.
When it comes to vaccination, we have experts who say it's safe and effective, but then again, other experts say it's not worth the risk and has links to autism.
The term expert seems to be used quite a bit these days. Just because someone is known as an expert or even labels themselves as an expert, it doesn't necessarily mean they have valid expert knowledge in a subject. We even have the situation where people refer to themselves as having mastered a modality, for example, Reiki masters, even though there is no credible evidence that Reiki, based on mystical energies, exists at all.
The stars and the planets are wonderful and mysterious. Astrologers and astronomers continue to study the night sky to learn more about our universe.
The science of astrology evolved out of the natural wonder and curiosity of our ancestors when they looked up at the night sky. It was not surprising they saw patterns in the stars and made up stories of gods, animals, and great adventures, and did so all over the world for thousands of years. In Australia, for example, the Aboriginal people used the appearance of stars at various times of the year to help them to know when to hunt for certain animals. However, today's astrology charts and predictions have very little to do with the real scientific study of stars, planets, and galaxies. That your personality or events in your future can be read by looking at the heavens has long since been shown to be nothing more than superstition and magical thinking. In the most important ways, you cannot compare astrology with astronomy. Like many other logical fallacies, it's not always easy and obvious to tell when the false equivalence fallacy is being used. Sometimes it takes a little thought or even research to know for sure. It's important not to be too critical with yourself and learn from each experience. Knowing a logical fallacy when you hear one, and even knowing its name, is important when arguing your point of view. However, you may come across as arrogant and not get very far if you call it out by name to your opponent when you hear it being used. If your opponent calls you out for using one, it's time to stop and think about how you are making your case. Use your knowledge of logical fallacies wisely, and remember that even if your point of view is right and you know all the pitfalls in arguing your case, it doesn't always mean you'll win on the day. And as skeptics, we must also remember that we too can be wrong at times. I'm Michelle Bijkersma from the Vic Skeptics. Thanks for listening.
Now it's time to see what's making news at Australian Skeptics with the Australian Skeptics Newsletter number 99. And this newsletter can be yours by going to www.skeptics.com.au and subscribing. Skepticon 2020 goes online. Following a lot of discussion, soul-searching, consulting, and an extremely helpful survey, the organisers of Skepticon 2020 have decided that the event this year will be purely online. Naturally, this decision has been influenced by the need to assure the health and safety of attendees due to COVID-19, whatever the nature of existing and possible future regulations may be. The upside is that this will be a first for an Australian Skeptics annual convention and gives a lot more people the chance to attend without the cost of travel and accommodation or getting out of their pyjamas for that matter. The next item says federal ministers flooded with unprecedented level of anti-vaccination mail. In the age of digital communications, a good old-fashioned letter-writing campaign pushed by a couple from northern New South Wales. Surprise. We also have stories on 7 traits for conspiratorial thinking. 7? More like 70 these days. A handy guide inspired by coronavirus and the pandemic documentary. The 7 characteristics to help you identify conspiratorial thinking include contradictory beliefs, overrising suspicion, belief in nefarious tenant, etc. Here's one. Should scientists take UFOs and ghosts more seriously? Actually, this article is more about why one particular journalist takes UFOs and ghosts seriously. You really only get into their tibular question in the last paragraph. Nonetheless, interesting perspective on one journalist's feelings, even if it is too full of pat responses like, quote, "I'm not sure," end quote, and quote, "I won't commit myself one way or the other," end quote, and quote, "You're entitled to your view," end quote. Also, a rise in paranormal activity in the home since quarantine. One wonders what home. Some interesting and edifying examples of faulty logic here. Otherwise, this piece would have been down the bottom of the newsletter with the silly stuff. And also we have the Nobel disease, when intelligence fails to protect against irrationality. And finally, the newsletter says the June 2020 issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics, will be out soon with a feature on chiropractic, crazy claims, doggy claims, the complexities of subluxation complex, sounds interesting, and general pseudoscience underpinnings. Not to mention how not to make wine taste better under strict scientific conditions, the insider's story on the Carlos hoax, psychics and mystics in Australian history, the story of Atlantis sunk, and much more. That's only a sample of what's available on the newsletter. And again, to sign up for this newsletter for yourself, just go to www.skeptics.com.au. Well, folks, if you remember last year, I was very lucky enough to go to DragonCon in Atlanta, Georgia. And what a wonderful time I had. And one of the fascinating people I met there was a young author by the name of Bailey Harris. And she was writing a series of books about, exploring history in the universe based around the character of Stardust. And I'm delighted to say, once again, joining me on the line all the way from the United States, we have Bailey Harris. Hello, Bailey.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Lovely to see you, because through the magic of Zoom and all sorts of things like that, we can see each other. But also, in the same meeting, I'm joined by Ariel Marcy from Brisbane, who is very interesting, has a very interesting life. Ariel, you're part of a group or an outlet or a company or something called Steam Galaxy Studios, but you're also a biologist. What's your story? What's your background?
Yeah, so I am a biologist first, I would say, and then I came across game design as a wonderful way to teach science, because science is very dynamic, you see, and so are games. And so they make a great medium to teach. And so I founded my company, Steam Galaxy, on the premise that games are particularly well suited to teach science.
I think you're absolutely right. And what's the origin of the term Steam Galaxy? Because it sort of reminds me a bit of steampunk, a little bit of old-fashioned and science fiction and things like that.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I love sci-fi. But STEAM in particular relates to STEM plus arts, so it is all caps. But I like the idea of a STEAM galaxy. It reminds me of a Milky Way, maybe.
It is very appealing. STEM plus arts equals Steam Galaxy. That's fascinating. And before we get talking about the original game, and this is a very interesting story, folks, let's... I came across this bit of information about you and I thought, dream of dreams. You get to do something incredibly amazing. You make 3D scans of rodent skulls.
That's right. So as you can hear from my accent, I'm American, but I live in Brisbane because I'm doing my PhD at the University of Queensland. And what's so great about Australia is that you guys have the best, most awesomely weird mammals. And this includes not just the egg-laying monotremes and the marsupials with their delightful pouches, but it also includes the native rodents. And a lot of people don't realize that Australia has over 60 native rodents. They're the most speciose mammalian family on the continent, which is quite an accomplishment, given that they've only been here for about 4 million years. So I was very interested in their evolution. And one way that you can do that is by studying the shape of their skulls, which are very complex, and they encode a lot of information about what they do and how they orient their vision. And so I get to use a very cool blue light 3D scanner, which very quickly and economically allows me to capture 3D scans of skulls, and then I use that as the basis of my data.
3D scans of skulls.
So yes, evolutionary studies.
It's like almost it should be a movie. 3D scans of skulls, the movie.
You know, they
I
make
love
necklaces now.
Oh, wow, of course. Wow. So you can then print them out on a wow. Oh, God, gotta love science. That's just fascinating. Now, Bailey, back to you. And just to remind our audience, of course, I was speaking to you last year about the Stardust series of books, and you wrote your first book when you were 8. And just to remind us all, what inspired you to write that book?
When I was 8 years old, I was watching a show with my family that's called Cosmos, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's the host of it, said in one of the episodes, our bodies are made out of stardust. And as an 8-year-old, I thought this was so surreal, and I was like, I have to go upstairs. I have to write about it, tell people about this. I thought it was so cool. That's how I started off with my first book.
Well, that series, Cosmos, with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and the original series way back in the 80s with Carl Sagan, my goodness me, that has inspired so many people, including myself, of course. It's a wonderful series indeed. Now, back to you, Ariel, for a moment. We have the original game that you invented or co-created way back in 2014 called Go Extinct. What was the idea behind that game?
Yeah, so I had the distinct honor of teaching full-time at Stanford University, which is where I graduated from the year after I graduated, in a course called Human Biology, which combined not only the usual track of biological sciences, but had a parallel track of courses of the social sciences, and they tried to make them sync up as much as possible. And what that meant is that I had a great diversity of students interested in anything and everything from medicine to improving health policy in Washington. And so that meant that I needed to make the course subject as interesting and engaging and as compelling and accessible as possible to a wide diversity of learners and people with different, backgrounds and preparedness for the biological track. One of the concepts I had the most difficulty with was actually one of my favorite concepts, which is the evolutionary tree, which, as an evolutionary biologist, I sort of live and breathe. I like to compare it to a Rosetta Stone. Like, once you know how to read it, you can approach a new set of organisms very easily by making inferences based on the organisms you understand.
Yeah.
So I was trying to teach this concept, which is a complicated concept to teach in a linear way, like we do with books or with stand-up lectures or even office hours. So I decided I needed to invent a new way of teaching it. And games, because they're not linear, they're dynamic, they're actually sort of circular, because you get to repeat the same sort of turn over and over. You get to really practice that one idea of thinking about clades, thinking about sets within sets. And so that little experiment turned into a game, turned into a Kickstarter, turned into my company, and has now turned into this collaboration, which I'm very excited about.
Now let's talk about this collaboration. You two have got together the Stardust series of books and the little Stardust character, plus this game called Go Extinct. And the new game has appeared. Go Extinct, Stardust Catches the Carnivores. And I'm very lucky, folks. I tell you what, I've got the whole game right here. Oh, there it goes, crashing into my microphone. I've got the whole game right here. I'm holding it up so everybody can see it. Look at that. And well, to describe it, it's fascinating. It's like the evolutionary tree. We've got the Miacid down the bottom there with Stardust, ancestor of Carnivora, and all the descendants, well, many of them, about 58 different animals going through to the modern era with things like the cat and the painted wolf, and we've got the elephant, seal, the skunk. We're going back through history, all the ancestors right back to the original one. And the game comes with a series of cards, which I'm picking up now, which tell you a little bit. We've got the grey wolf, we've got the cheetah, all the carnivores. And we can see on the card, we can check, and there's a little evolutionary history there. And Ariel, I believe the game is loosely based on the game Fish or Go Fish.
That's right, yes. So like Go Fish, you're just collecting sets, but instead of collecting sets of numbers, you're collecting sets of closely related animals, which in biology we call crown clades. So you're trying to get a monophyletic clade, which is all of the unique animals. So in the sort of wolf group, the true dog group, you would need the gray wolf, the painted wolf, the bush dog, and Darwin's Zorro. So you need those 4 animals, and you'd use the evolutionary tree to figure out what those animals were and what other things you could ask to get them.
Wow.
So the twist with these games is that not only can you ask for the specific animal, you can ask for the ancestors too. So you could ask for any true dog, so any of those 4 animals I explained, or you could ask for any dog-like animal. You could even ask for the mysid, which would be any carnivore. So it really practices that thinking of clade thinking, which we also call tree thinking, and working with the probabilities of what you're likely to get.
Now, Bailey, how did you actually end up hooking up with Ariel for this project?
We started off at Kickstarter, and I found her game and I thought it was so cool, and then we got connected and we talked, and I think that's pretty much how it happened. But
right.
I think Ariel knows a little bit more.
Well, I'd say your Stardust Explorers Earth Wonders was the first real collaboration that we started, and that was so much fun. I was really honored that you asked me to help you with that because it's such a great book. And one of the reasons we decided to focus on carnivores is because Bailey chose a lot of great examples involving carnivores in her latest book. So everything from bears to wolves to the mysid itself. So she already had a lot of amazing illustrations to include in the game. So that was really fun.
Wow, it sounds like a fabulous meeting of the minds there. Now, Bailey, to you, why do you think that evolution education is so important to you personally? And why do you think it's so important to children all around the world?
Evolution has helped me understand how I am connected to everything in our world. And I feel like when I look at other animal or even a plant, it is amazing. So to me, to understand that we all have common ancestors is just amazing. So yeah.
It is. It's absolutely amazing. It's fascinating to learn these things. I personally find it, when I discovered many years ago, that birds are the descendants of some dinosaurs, that just blew my mind. I thought that was just amazing. And I saw a little a sparrow, and I thought, it's a descendant from a dinosaur? It really, maybe that can be the next one. Maybe it's birds to dinosaurs. Oh, it's endless. It's endless fun. Now, Ariel, how can people get in touch with you or find out more about Steam Galaxy Studios?
Certainly. Well, we have a website. It's www.steamgalaxy.com. And my contact email is there, or they can email me at aemarcy@steamgalaxy.com. I'm very happy to talk about anything and everything from evolutionary biology to game design. And we have lots of free resources on the website, in particular for teachers, aligning the game with standards, both in Australia and in the US. And hopefully they're understandable and applicable to other places as well. And there's a cool Design Your Own app that people can use to sort of explore what the game's about and make their own versions with Australian animals.
Very cool.
And then, of course, we have more information about the carnivore edition as well.
And, of course, we can say that now, as if people are listening and they're finding this as fascinating and fun as I am, they can help out indeed. There's a Kickstarter, isn't there?
That's right. Yeah, we're both running the Kickstarter. Bailey's the lead on that, and we're just a week in, and very exciting. We're almost halfway there, so we'd love if this game sounds of any interest, we'd love your support, and you can check it out on Kickstarter.
That's great, because I had a quick look myself, and when you go there, you can get a much better understanding of the game. You can see the wonderful illustrations, how the board works, the cards. You can see Bailey and yourself. So I suggest everybody go and have a look at that. Check it out for yourself. I'll add a link to the Kickstarter, folks, in this week's show notes. But my goodness me, what a treat it's been for me to chat to such two great minds on different sides of the planet, working together to create something to educate children. So Bailey, all the way over there in the United States, thank you very much. Great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was very fun. I'm glad to talk to you as well. You're a very amazing person.
Well. And Ariel in Brisbane, up there in Queensland, thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you to those people, as ever, who continue to support the Skeptic Zone, and those new people who have just come on board to support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. You wouldn't believe the difference $5 a month makes here at the Skeptic Zone. And as I've mentioned before, until things get back to normal, my other sources of income have they're on holiday. They've gone. They're having a rest, my other sources of income. So if it wasn't for the people who support the Skeptic Zone, I guess I'd be not doing the Skeptic Zone anymore. But yes, $5 a month from enough people, of course, makes a huge difference. So you can go to skepticzone.tv, have a look at the subscription link or the Patreon PayPal link, and it would be very helpful for the show if more of you, in fact, would chip in for $5 a month. Honestly, I don't think that's too much to ask if you enjoy the show each week, if it means something to you, if you get something out of it, if it helps you pass an hour every week, or if you learn something. And I think the Skeptic Zone reporters and I will be doing another think tank, online think tank, probably in the next couple of weeks. I'll ask them if they can get together. I had such a lot of fun doing that a couple of weeks ago. Don't forget to check out skepticzone.tv, in fact, to look at all the show notes for each episode that goes out, including the time code for every segment. If you're interested in just one segment or another, you can check out where those time codes are, go straight to that segment. And indeed, if you're listening to this on your iPhone, you can just click the time code link in the player and also see the images change as each segment changes. Isn't technology just wonderful? But for this week, talking into two microphones for a test today. This is Richard Saunders in the Skeptic Zone studios, signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. And D10. Oh, here's one. That's a better one. It's a pretty one. Okay. I always have to write them. Sometimes I've done this before, recording myself, and I get to the end and I can't remember all the numbers. Yes, folks, joining me now at the end of the show, from near the beginning of the show, it's Susan Gerbic. Hello once again, Susan.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
This is your
I
favorite
am
part.
so stoked. I'm gonna win today.
You're going to win. It is a bit different today. It's the dice game, folks. For those of you who don't know, sometimes after the music ends, the show keeps going. We roll a die 3 times, and, well, you use your psychic or dumb luck predicting power to see if you can guess what the number's going to be. I'm going to be using a D10 this time, Susan, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera so you can verify for everybody. Look at that beautiful blue one.
Oh, what a pretty blue.
Yeah. But I'm going to roll it 3 times, but I'm going to roll it twice 3 times. What I mean is the numbers are going to be from 1 to 100 this time. So I'm going to roll the first time, it'll be the tens column, so to speak, and the second will be the ones column. So, Susan, what's your first prediction? You've got from 1 to 100.
5.
5? Sure, why not? Hey, that's as likely as any other
number. It's a number between 1 and 100.
Okay, here we go. The first roll for the tens column is... Oh, it's a 9. So it's going to be 90-something. Here we go, second roll. 90... Oh, that's interesting. 99. Okay, so that's the first number is 99. Going to rattle it a lot. It's rattled. Okay, next guess.
5.
All right, sure. Here we go. First roll for the tens column is a 7. Second roll. So it's 74 is the second number. 74.
Almost.
Now, it's time for me to use my psychic powers. I think Susan's going to predict 5. Susan?
5.
5. Okay. Here we go. First roll for the tens column is... And 5 hasn't even come up yet at all.
Well, it's going to be a 0.
First roll is 9 again. It's interesting. Very high numbers this time. 9, and the second number is 0. 0 did come up.
Well, so if it was... Okay.
Okay. So the numbers this week.
It has to come up 0 first for it to get 5. Okay.
Yeah. The winning numbers
I was
are...
so close.
I know. What?
I know. I got numbers each time.
You got numbers each time. The winning numbers this week are 99, 74, and 90.
Oh.
No.
Well, I'm sure there's a way of adding them together and dividing them somehow that come out to 5. Some clever listener out there is going to figure out how to make all those numbers turn out to be 5.
Will I do it one more time just for you?
Okay, if you really want.
Okay, what number do you predict?
5.
After a hard day's skepticism, this is quite fun. Here we go. First number coming up in the tens column. I kid you not. I'm going to hold that up so you can see it. It's a 5.
5. But that's the 10th, so it's not going to work.
That's right. It's going to be 50.
50-something.
50. Well, at least a 5 did come up, you know.
Okay, well.
50.
You know, maybe it's 55.
It's hiding. Oh, here we go. 57.
Almost. I was just 2 away.
Thank you, Susan.
I never win.
Oh.
I always play this game and I never win. But I guess I can't influence it because of it's already recorded when I'm listening to it. So.
It is. It's a bit strange. And that other noise you hear is Henrietta the cat at the office door trying to break in. Maybe she wants to play the dice game.
I'm sure she would love to play the dice game, and she'd probably do a lot better than I did.
That's her.